Hello, BookTube. I have a little TBR torture for you. I bet you thought this would only be once in a while. What if I did it every day? Oh my god. But this is a TBR torture for both of us, because half of this, I'm going to show you 8 books, and 4 of them I can't talk about, because I've read them. And the other 4 we'll go through together. I haven't read them yet. So we'll start with the ones I have read. And the first one is YA. It comes out in May, and it is terrific. Absolutely terrific. I highly recommend it. Put it on your list. Read up about it. I will tell you all about it here, although I couldn't help but notice when I read the book that the pub sheet really doesn't do the book credit. This is by Alexis Bass, and it's called Happily and Madly. That is the cover. Happily and Madly. And the pub sheet calls her a critically acclaimed novelist. Happily and Madly follows a teenage girl named Maris Brown who breaks all the rules until her mother ships her off to spend the summer with her father. Maris has been told 2 things about her destiny. She will fall happily and madly in love, and she may die at age 18. The summer before that fateful birthday, Maris is in the wealthy beach town of Cross Cove with her estranged father and his new family, and the infamous Duvals. We're another family in town, and they are mesmerizing. They draw trouble to them like a magnet. They're one of those families. Since the youngest member of the Duval family, Edison, is back from college and back in the arms of Maris's new stepsister, her summer looks to be a long string of lazy days on the Duval's lush beach. But Edison is hiding something. And the more Maris learns about him, the more she's given signs that she should stay away, as far away from him as possible. As wrong as it is, and it's not just signs, she's also told that. Over and over again, she's told, look, you don't know, there's a whole story here, stay away from him, for your own good. She's not just told that by overprotective people who don't know anything. She's also told that by people who very much openly have her best interests at heart. But the heart wants what it wants. As wrong as it is, Maris is drawn to him. Around Edison, she feels truly alive, and she's not willing to give that up, even if it means a collision course with destiny. And the collision course with destiny it sounds very artsy-fartsy, but really it's brushes with some very dark stuff and some very mean people. And in the midst of all of that is growing like a dark cloud on the horizon in the background of this book the whole time. But the most enchanting thing about it is, again, one of the most predictable things. But you already know, if you watch this channel, you know that I don't need fiction to break any new grounds. I don't need anything to break any new grounds. All I need to do is do what it wants to do with conviction. I want it to move me. If it does that, I don't care how predictable it is. I don't care how many hundreds of times I've seen it before. I love Regency romances, for God's sake. If you've read one, you've almost literally read them all. So I'm not worried at all to say that the main attraction of this book, the thing the author does best, is the growing connection between the 2 young lovers. Yes, they are not supposed to fall in love. Yes, there's all sorts of attractions in different directions. Yes, there's trouble that will come part and parcel with any kind of alliance, and yet it works wonderfully. It's captured beautifully. So this, what did I mention? This comes out in May. Did I say May? Yes, it comes out in late May. I strongly recommend it. This is the kind of YA that ought not to be just for YA, just for people who actually are young adults. Because as you know, at age 28, it's been 15 years since I was a YA. And yet I love this. So that's the first one that I've read. The next one that I've read, I don't think we ever saw this on this channel, but if this is up your alley, then you have to read this book. And that's not what I was expecting at all. This is by Andrew Feldman, and it's called Ernesto, The Untold Story of Hemingway in Revolutionary Cuba. This is a Hemingway biography that stresses Hemingway's connection with Cuba, and that along the way tells the whole story of the revolutionary Cuba that was going on all around him, that filled a lot of his thoughts, and that fills some of his writing, including his most famous fictional creation, who is Cuban. His most famous creation, no one remembers. Only Hemingway devotees remember any of the wan, poorly drawn Americans in any of his fiction. Everybody remembers The Old Man and the Sea. And I thought Hemingway's had, to put it mildly, a lot of biographers, and one of his first major biographies, Carlos Baker, It's still one of his best biographies. Baker's book is incredible, just incredible. Had a huge print run in hardcover, had a huge print run in mass market paperback. You might be able to find it. I strongly recommend it. But I remember reading that and thinking, well, okay, Baker deals with the Cuban connection, with the Cuban-Hemingway connection. Hemingway's property was there. A large part of his life was there. A large part of his working life was there. And in Hemingway biographies, it tends to get treated as just part of the background. Hemingway biographers tend to not turn a strong magnifying glass on that part of Hemingway's life, but Baker does. And I thought, well, okay, then this is just going to be that, and it was a lot more than that. It not only is it beautifully done, just wonderfully, energetically told, but it really does. It really is revelatory. It goes far beyond anything on this heading that any Hemingway biography has ever done. So believe it or not, this is a Hemingway, despite all the books on Hemingway that have ever been written, if you love this author, this is a book that you really should read. And I guarantee you, 2019 will see 4 Hemingway books that you don't need to read. But anyway, let me tell you, let me see here. Feldman was the first North American scholar permitted to study in residence at the legendary author's beloved Cuban home. And he references a huge amount of Cuban scholarship on Hemingway. Hemingway first landed in Cuba in 1928, but in some ways he never left. After a decade visiting regularly, he settled near Cojimar, a tiny fishing village in east of Havana, and came to think of himself as Cuban. His daily life among the common people there taught him surprising lessons and inspired the novel that would rescue his declining career. That book, The Old Man and the Sea, won him a Pulitzer and 1 year later a Nobel Prize. In a rare gesture of humility, Hemingway, affectionately known as Ernesto to his Cuban friends, announced to the press that he accepted the coveted Nobel as a citizen of Cojimar. That line is completely correct, that rare gesture of humility. In fact, there's a part in here where we get the much truer Hemingway. Oh, where is it? Did I turn down the page? I'm not supposed to turn down pages. I know several of you have called me monsters for turning down pages, but I think I did. Yes, here's a quote from Hemingway. I was very happy that you liked what you read of the book, but I would have thought you certifiable fool if you had not. There is never any doubt when something is right, but it makes you very happy to have someone like you, someone you like and respect, say so. That's pure Hemingway. That's writing about his fiction. He never needed any kind of validation. But this is that story. Andrew Feldman has dedicated over 10 years of his life to researching the life and works of Ernest Hemingway. While completing his PhD at the Sorbonne in Paris, Hemingway's... Hemingway's Finca Viga opened its doors for the first time ever to foreign researchers and academics. Feldman's research reveals new relationships with Cuban politicians and artists, as well as a 15-year romantic friendship with a Cuban woman from Havana who is portrayed wonderfully in these pages. Wonderfully. But then again, everybody is. This author really, it's not just that this is opening new ground, consulting new archives and whatnot. It's also that the author realizes once he's done all that he still has to tell a great story, and he does. So this comes out in May, and I strongly recommend it. If you are a big fan of Hemingway, I'm, as you know, not. But I am a big fan of biography. I love it when biographies make me think or see something in a new way, and this one does. So again, I recommend it. This next one, also biography. We've seen it on this channel. I was hoping that it would be brilliant, and it is. And this is Alexandra Popov, Vasily Grossman, and the Soviet Century. This is the finished copy from Yale University Press. I think I praised this already on this channel, but I no harm in doing it again. Grossman is the author of Life and Fate, and also the enormous novel Stalingrad, which is getting its first ever complete English language translation this summer in June from the New York Review of Books. He is a towering genius of fiction. He's also a great nonfiction writer. A lot of his newspaper writing has been published, and all of it is tremendously effective. And this author she's a Soviet-era scholar. Not that she's Soviet era, she's a scholar of the Soviet era. And it's not as long as I would want it to be, but it is an incredibly detailed, amazingly sympathetic life of this author, whose the events of his own life read like something out of a Russian novel, like out of one of his own novels. This is an amazing Grossman book. It belongs on the shelf with his own novels and his own nonfiction writing as it comes to be published. I can't imagine that it could be bettered, except for length. I could imagine some biographer in a year or 2 years coming out with a 1,000-page biography of Vasily Grossman, and maybe emphasizing a bit more of the literature, going into a lot more detail in some areas. I could maybe see that happening, but this is tremendous, just tremendous, and groundbreaking. And those future big biographers will need to use this book, and I highly recommend it. And then the next one is a debut novel, and it is utterly remarkable, just utterly remarkable. And once again, the pub sheet doesn't particularly do it enough credit. Maybe that's just a feeling of liking a book, any book. This comes out in March. This is right around the corner. It's by Jonathan Carr, and it's called Make Me a City. And it is, among other things, I mean, it is enrapturing for a lot of its characters. This author really makes characters pop on the page. But among other things, it is the ultimate Chicago novel. A Chicago historical novel, a novel about the early days of Chicago. I can't imagine anyone doing a more Chicagoan type book on that heading. Let me see here. Jonathan Carr's sweeping debut captures the heart and soul of Chicago as the city made its transition from solitary outpost in 1800 to large and resilient modern city in 1900. And a lot of that is told in a metafictional device throughout this book called An Alternate History of Chicago by Professor Winship. I've included in the book, if you wait long enough, and you'll get dribs and drabs, but if you wait long enough, included in the book is a priceless send-up of a book review of Professor Winship's book. So there's all sorts of levels going on here, and they work wonderfully. This author, let me read you about him. He's first of all, he's not a dewy ingenue. he's not 20. In between periods living in the UK, Kenya, Gambia, Greece, and Louisiana, Jonathan Carr first visited Chicago in 1983. As a graduate of Cambridge University, he has worked as a travel correspondent, a book reviewer, and a teacher of English. He holds a PhD in creative writing from Bath Spa University. Make Me a City is his first novel, and he currently lives in Bologna. A varied life, and it shows, because boy, oh boy, does he, like I said, he knows people. His people are just this huge, believable throng of voices. So, again, I highly recommend it. It is a perfect example of something that we've noticed on this channel, which is 2019's embarrassingly rich glut of great historical fiction. And needless to say, if you live in or near Chicago, if Chicago is your city, you have to read this book. But anyway, that comes out soon. That's a March release. Some of these weren't. But those are the 4 that I have already read. They're all recommendations. I kind of weeded them out that way. And then we're going to do 4 that I haven't read that are on my docket. They're coming up, and we'll see. They could torture your TBR. They're certainly torturing mine. The first one is by Jared Cohen, and it is Accidental Presidents. 8 Men Who Changed History. This comes out in April. And it's as you can tell from those faces, you will recognize some of those faces. This is about all the men who accidentally became president, either through resignation or assassination, natural death, whatever the cause was. It's about them, and it's about how they altered the course of American history. And it sounds fascinating. It's a fairly hefty thing. I don't have a finished copy, but I want to dig into this right away. Of course, there's an element of this book that is, believe it or not, a Trump book. They seem unavoidable, and I'm sure that Jared Cohen would say no, but lurking at the back of this book is the idea, the hope, that we're going to have another accidental president. Sometime between now and 2020, that we're going to have another accidental president. I have seen confident predictions online, on social media. People saying, later in 2019, Trump is going to resign office in order to cut a sweet deal to protect his family from jail time. That's going to happen in 2019. Or it's going to happen in 2020. Or he won't run again in 2020 because it'll be a deal that he'll make with prosecutors. I won't run again if you don't prosecute my family or whatever. Like Trump cares about his family. Like he cares. All of that is fantasy. All of that part is fantasy. But like I've mentioned, when we've seen Trump books in the past, if that is part of the fuel that generates these books and the books themselves are good, then I'll take it as a motivation. I think it's delusional. It's part of the delusion that was born in late 2015 and in the election year of 2016. But whether or not that specter is heavy over this book or not, I still want to read collections I love collections like this. Wartime presidents, young presidents, firebrand presidents, populist presidents, and now accidental presidents, whatever it is. I'm a big fan of books on the American presidency, so I can't wait to get to this. Then this next one, this is a subject I'm surprised I have not seen more big books on this subject. I predict that I will. This is by Louise Aronson, and it is Elderhood, Redefining Aging, Transforming Medicine, and Reimagining Life. There's a card in an elderly hand for the cover. A very nice design. Louise Aronson is, she's young, and she is an MD. She's a doctor, writer, and professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. And she's the author of The History of Present Illness. She's received a McDowell Fellowship and the Sonora Review Prize and 4 Pushcart nominations. So in other words, in addition to her knowledge of her subject, her writing has been honored, which is always encouraging. In medicine, she has been recognized with a Gold Professorship for Humanism, the California Home Care Physician of the Year Award, and the American Geriatric Society Geriatrician of the Year Award. So she knows her subject. And this is, what here? For more than 5,000 years, old has been defined as beginning between ages 60 and 70. 70. Well, 70. That means most people alive today will spend more years in elderhood than in childhood, and that is absolutely true. Nobody expects to die at 70 anymore. And many will be elders for 40 years or more. Yet at the very moment that humans are living longer than ever before, we've made old age into a disease, a condition to be dreaded, disparaged, neglected, and denied. Also, again, absolutely true. Warehousing of old people. The slighting of them, firing of them, not hiring of them. The idea that you are supposed to live, that you will still be living an active and socially engaged and important life at 80 seems to be reserved only for American presidents. And it needs to change. It absolutely needs to change. The American population is growing older, and the American society has not accommodated that fact. Books like this are going to be more and more fascinating to me. Let's see here. Reminiscent of Oliver Sacks, noted Harvard-trained geriatrician Louise Aronson uses stories from her quarter century of caring for patients and draws from history, science, literature, popular culture, and her own life to weave a vision of old age that's neither a nightmare nor a utopian fantasy. Can't wait. Can't wait to read this. This is, did I mention June? This is June, but it's still on my docket. Then this next one, for some of you, those of you who are on social media perhaps a little too much, those of you who are perhaps at college campuses, those of you perhaps watch videos from college campuses, this next author will need precious little introduction. This is a March book. This is The Right Side of History by Ben Shapiro. This is a book distillation of a lot of the points, rants, discussions that he has made him infamous on college campuses. He's been deplatformed, he's been banned, protested, had alarms pulled on his speeches, and yet, well, let's see what we have here. America has a God-shaped hole in its heart, argues New York Times best-selling author Ben Shapiro, and we shouldn't fill it with politics and hate. Sure as hell shouldn't fill it with God. But in 2016, Ben Shapiro spoke at UC Berkeley. Hundreds of police officers were required to protect his speech, which was, ironically, about the necessity for free speech and rational debate. He came to argue that Western civilization is in the midst of a crisis of purpose and ideas. Our freedoms are built upon the twin notions that every human being is made in God's image, and that human beings were created with reason, capable of exploring God's world. And how do you know that it's God's world? because a human tells you that. And how do you know if you're exploring it correctly? Well, a human would like to tell you that too. And what about whether or not you can vote or marry? Well, God will have a say in that, but you haven't heard God. Now it'll be a human who tells you that. Tells you what God thinks of that. He should be out of the picture. Okay, completely. Ben Franklin, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Alexander Hamilton. You think you're smarter than them? They thought he should be out of the picture. And they were right. But we can think these values, we can thank these values for the birth of science, the dream of progress, human rights, prosperity, peace, and artistic beauty, except that's not true. We can thank the Enlightenment for that, which specifically put, anyway, Jerusalem and Athens built America, ended slavery, defeated the Nazis and the communists, lifted billions from poverty, and gave billions spiritual purpose. Jerusalem and Athens were the foundation of the Magna Carta and the Treaty of Westphalia. They were the foundations of the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. Civilizations that rejected Jerusalem and Athens have collapsed into dust. This is all, the back of the book is giving you a précis of Ben Shapiro's argument. They're not arguing themselves. They're channeling him. The USSR, the Nazis, Venezuela, we are in the process of abandoning Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law, favoring instead the moral subjectivism and the rule of passion. And yet we are watching our civilization collapse into age-old tribalism, individualistic hedonism, and moral subjectivism. We believe we can reject Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law and satisfy ourselves with intersectionality or scientific materialism, or progressive politics, or authoritarian governments, or nationalistic solidarity. We can't. The West is special, and in The Right Side of History, Shapiro bravely explains that too many of us have lost sight of the moral purpose that drives us to be better, or the sacred duty to work together for the greater good, or both. So there you go. That is Ben Shapiro, the heart and soul of Ben Shapiro's argument, the thing that gets him protested, the thing that requires him to have police protection. He's a polarizing figure, and I have not read this book yet. I was kind of expecting to have read it before now, because I know a lot I've listened to a lot of his speeches, but there you go. I don't know what I'll think of it, but I will report back. It's right on the horizon. And then the last of the TBR Torture segment, that is books that I haven't read yet. I think we've already seen this on this channel. I'll have to check my forthcoming bookshelf. I think this is a March release. Yes, this is a mid-March release. So this is the Ben Shapiro book, so right on the horizon. And it has unbelievable blurbs. This guy has been an eminence grise for just forever in American diplomatic circles. His name is William Burns, and this is The Back Channel. The subtitle is A Memoir of American Diplomacy and the Case for Its Renewal. And that subtitle will tip you off that this is yet another Trump book. The author, again, would say no. He would say, I have been working in diplomatic corps forever. I've learned a lot. I have a lot of wisdom. I don't doubt that it's true. I know something of this person's career. The author, I'm sure, would say, no, I was going to write this book anyway. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. The only reason you're writing this book is because you consider that not only your accomplishments, but the entirety of American diplomatic history is in danger. And the reason you think that is because of Donald Trump. You wouldn't have had the fire in your belly motivation to write a book like this in the first term of Hillary Clinton. You wouldn't have had that motivation. We'd be swamped with other kinds of books, but they wouldn't be the civilization's coming to an end books, like the kind we're seeing everywhere here on this channel. But the blurbs are from Walter Isaacson, John Lewis Gaddis, George Shultz, Condoleezza Rice, Henry Kissinger, John Kerry, James Baker III, Madeleine Albright, and Hillary Clinton. How's that for starting? So this is, over the course of more than 3 decades as a diplomat, William Burns served 5 presidents and 10 secretaries of state. He played a central role in the most consequential diplomatic episodes of his time, from the bloodless end of the Cold War to the collapse of post-Cold War relations with Putin's Russia, from post-9/11 tumult in the Middle East to the secret nuclear talks with Iran. Burns is widely regarded as one of the most distinguished and admired American statesmen of the last half-century. And that part is not pub sheet hyperbole. You can scarcely find one of this guy's old employers or co-workers who has a negative thing to say about him. And often he's described behind the scenes as the coolest head in the room, which is just the person you want to write a book. Burns is widely, upon his retirement in 2014, Secretary John Kerry said Burns belonged to, quote, a very short list of American diplomatic legends. Now, Burns draws on his decades of experience to make an impassioned argument for the enduring values of diplomacy in an increasingly volatile world, which is code for Donald Trump. He doesn't want to see the world burn. Kerry wrote a book for the same reason and would also deny it. But anyway, like I've said on this channel and even maybe in this video, it's been forever, so I don't remember. I don't hold that against these books. I don't really, ultimately, I don't care what's flushing them all out of the woodwork. I care about their own individual worth. So I can't wait to get to this. I will do this. This and the Ben Shapiro book are the next things on the horizon, because if I'm going to write about them, I need to read them right away. So there you go. That is a TBR Torture for Friday. I was going to call it Friday Reads, but Torture is so much more dramatic. So we'll start off with the books that I haven't read yet. I told you all about them. I'm excited for them. I'm interested. I'm trying to intrigue you as well, because misery loves company. So we have The Back Channel by William Burns, a career diplomat writing about formal and informal diplomacy. We have Accidental Presidents, just a serial, biographical look at the men who became president without planning to, when they did. Then Elderhood, a trained doctor and an experienced writer looking at aging, at the aging population, at how we're thinking about it and how we should be, how we're failing, this increasingly large part of the demographic. And The Right Side of History by Ben Shapiro. Say what you want about him, no one's neutral. Those are the ones that I haven't read yet, and I will report back on them. Then the four that I have read: Make Me a City, Jonathan Carr's rollicking debut novel, just amazing. Vasily Grossman and the Soviet Century. This is a very tightly done, very knowingly written biography of a great 20th century writer and his time. Then Ernesto. Last thing in the world I expected 2019 to field for me would be a Hemingway biography that actually adds something new to the enormous biography pile of Hemingway, and this book does. So I'll be telling you more. I'll bring it up again when I get a finished copy, and I'm hoping to review it. But I can already recommend it. It's tremendously well done. And lastly, another recommend. This is YA. This is Happily and Madly, a novel about a young woman who is blessed and cursed. And it weighs on her mind. She's cynical about it, like all young people are, but it weighs on her mind, this prophecy that she's going to be very happy, find love, and also die at a young age, maybe. And she tries to be sassy about it, but it weighs on you too. When you're reading the book, you're wondering, what's going to happen here? Even though prophecies are nonsense, you're still thinking, what if there's something to this? what do I have to worry about? By the time you're halfway through this book, you love this girl. You don't want anything bad to happen to her. Portrait of Edison, the bad boy, is also wonderful. But anyway, so there you go. That is a TBR Torture for Friday. And that's quite enough out of me for now, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.